Hi, I'm Tom Luna. I'm a former school board member. I was privileged to serve as senior advisor to U.S. Secretary of Education Rod Page. I also had the honor of serving for 8 years as Idaho State Superintendent of Public Instruction. During that time, I also served as president of the Council of Chief State School Officers. One thing I have learned in all these experiences is that educating children is not rocket science, it's more complicated. On my podcast, Swimming Upstream, we will visit with courageous leaders who challenge the prevailing tide and inspire all of us to swim against the current. Let's jump in.
Welcome to another episode of Swimming Upstream. I'm Tom Luna, your host for this podcast, and we're in season number 2, and we're excited about the guests that we've had today. We're talking to leaders around the country that are doing things in their state and around the country to help improve education for more kids and more schools. And today our special guest is Superintendent Richard Woods from the great state of Georgia. And Superintendent Woods, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, pleasure to be with you today. Thank you.
Yeah, and Richard, we've known each other for some time. You've been in office. This is your third term, so you were reelected in 2022.
Yes.
So you'll be a 12-year state superintendent, and today that's pretty uncommon. The tenure of state chiefs is getting shorter and shorter. It seems like, especially those that are appointed. But you're elected. You're in your first year of your third term. But talk to us about your path to becoming state superintendent. Kind of your background.
Well, I think for myself, definitely graduating Fitzgerald High School in 1980, worked in, the private sector for a while, eventually decided, what did I want to do with my life, at a certain point. And, always loved teaching, always loved being around kids. And so received my undergraduate from Kennesaw State, K-12 education, social studies. So, that was always my passion. In fact, my history teachers in high school were all World War II veterans. So they definitely had a big impact on my decision to go into teaching. Had a great art teacher, probably could have been an art teacher as well. Worked in a little small district known as Irwin County down in South Georgia, where my parents were raised. And so I was there for 22 years, 14 years as a high school social studies teacher, coach, in various roles there, and then 8 years in administration, primarily at the elementary school at that time. Really became disenchanted with what I saw was taking place in education through the No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top era, and felt that we had taken our eye really off the ball of what we should have been about, and that was about kids. And because all I heard was the test. So I felt that I had a lot to offer. Probably was encouraged, somewhat to really think about politics. Just sitting in my church with a sermon, and came up a little short in 2010, but then 2014 we got back into it. And was elected. And so here we've been for the past 8.5 years now.
Wow, incredible. 12 states elect their state superintendent, and Georgia is one of them. Idaho is one. One thing that many of us have in common is we come up a bit short the first time we ran.
Yeah.
Right. But then you learn a lot. I remember when I was running the first time and people would say, you may not win, but you're going to learn so much. You'll be a far better candidate, better campaign. And I used to think, I'm not in this to come in second place, right? I want to win now, but you do learn a lot. And I think I was a better state superintendent 4 years later when I ran the second time and won. But I don't know what your thoughts were, but it's a unique experience to run a statewide race and to meet people and kids and educators all across the state as a candidate, and then running for re-election.
Yeah, well, it's definitely, I think it was probably the best loss I ever had, when it comes to things. As you said, definitely learned a lot during that time. Better prepared me for the run ahead. But you take life as it comes. And,
Yeah.
for anybody that really steps out and runs, I don't care what position they run for. It's a big challenge, and it takes a lot to really put yourself out there.
Yes. I admire people regardless of which party or what position they're running for. Anybody that's willing to put their neck out there, they risk their reputation, their fortune, their career, their family, puts up with a lot, right? So I have like I said, regardless of what party or what position, people that are willing to put their name on the ballot, I have a lot of respect for them.
Yeah, very much.
Having done it, right? So you have that focus and that view of that. But let's jump in and talk about some of the things that you've worked on. You kind of talked about the things that motivated you to become a candidate and to be state superintendent. You have the what I think you referred to as the roadmap for reimagining education in or reimagining K-12 education, kind of a roadmap for that. Let's talk about some of the points of that. I think there's 10 different points that you identify and that they're working on. A couple of those that caught my attention, student level learning rather than grade level, kind of a mastery-based approach. Some states have gone down this mastery path. Some have continued on and are seeing some success. Talk to us about your the journey and the path that George is on and where it's currently at. Maybe some of those things you've learned, and the importance of mastery-based versus a seat time approach to education.
Well, I think for me, we're looking at what's best for kids. Setting them up for success. And I think we have to, definitely realize that, our kids don't come to us all at the same level, all at the same experience. So that growth factor is going to look a little bit different. The resources we have to spend for those that just don't have the life experiences that some, we have to realize that, we have to be flexible in that end. Part of that I think does, involve testing. One of the things we had been working on was try to make more of a formative test. I would like to have seen, I think, more flexibility from the federal government on that area. Because when you expect every child to perform at a certain level per grade level, then that means my teacher is going to be focused on the standards that I'm responsible for. Not necessarily looking at where their kids are, but what's my accountability look like? And that's, completely understandable. So, I think, trying to have, a set of what that looks like, we continue to expand that. Our pilot, we pretty well closed it down just because we just didn't get the flexibility from US Ed. But, hopefully there will be some things that we, will continue to look at. For me, it's, using a model that the feds, such as the NAEP, that's something they don't test every year. I'm thinking, why can't we, test every other year as far as high stakes and use that off year to really catch kids up or also to accelerate kids? I think it's very important that we just don't focus on those kids that need that extra help to catch up, but also just don't hold kids back that are ready to move on. So, that may be something we look more intently at in the future. But also thinking about kids when they get to middle school, high school, need to have some flexibility because their desires and their career choices are definitely different. And I think, one of the things we definitely are trying to do is expand graduation pathways. I think it really needs to look more of what is in the best interest of kids. Kids that are going to math, science, medical field, their requirements are definitely different than somebody like me that was a liberal arts major, or perhaps those going into the technical field, military, or want to go straight into the workforce. What does credentialing look like? So, hopefully we'll continue to expand those opportunities.
When you look, you mentioned about, like No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top. I was a school board member and then worked in the Bush administration for a period of time when No Child Left Behind was emerging. And then I was in office during Race to the Top. It seems to me like you mentioned before, we know that there's a place for testing and it's necessary. Back, when No Child Left Behind came out, obviously annual standardized tests became a big part of that. Mm-hmm. Our technology was so limited, right? And, paper and pencil and once a year bubble test was, what most districts were able to do. And so it was very limited on what we could learn from those assessments. But to your point, all of a sudden they became the most important thing. And what I kind of learned from that is that, your accountability system will trump any other decisions that are made by a district and stuff. That's what they'll start focusing on those things you measure. And so talk to us about as technology, and for example, formative tests are a lot more available and I guess easier to administer and less intrusive and disruptive, which wasn't the case even 10 years ago, right? And how does that factor into gathering the kind of information we need on how students are learning and what they've mastered and what they need more help with, but in a less intrusive way, perhaps?
Well, I think that, with the technology today, I mean, it is just amazing how much growth has been in that area. A lot of schools and districts in Georgia, I mean, they actually perform formative testing, in-house. So you're able to see real time, real live data, what's going on with their kids. It's something that, allows educators to make more relevant decisions to improve a child as they go. I think for myself, as a former coach, I mean, we looked at game films, after every Friday night. We didn't wait till the end of the year and look at all the game films.
Yeah.
And so I think, it's important to look at that. I think, trying to have that mindset that we're student focused, but data driven. I mean, data, to your point, has its place. Testing has its place. But I think we have to use it appropriately because it is a tool. And, technology allows us to do much more. I think even within the state of Georgia, we're able to test less, but gather so much more information than what we used to have. I mean, where everything had to be, pen and paper or pencil and paper. I think that when I was a curriculum director down in Irving County, I mean, a lot of my stuff was a lot of hands-on analysis and just looking at things, which took a lot of time. But in today's time, there's no reason that we can't use data that's real time and do it in a way in which we support our children more effectively.
And that goes back to the individualized learning that you talk about, right? Is if you have that data on every child, it's gathered on a regular basis, whether it's through homework assignments or through pop quizzes, the things that they always had in our school, if all that is done digitally, then you're gathering information about what a child knows and doesn't know. And if you end up having an assessment at the end of the year, it really should just confirm what you already know, because you have all this formative data as you're working forward. What were some of the obstacles other than just the federal government? What were some of the obstacles as you were, working through your pilot? You're not the only state that has done this, but in the end, still, trying to get the federal government to give states that kind of flexibility. What, maybe share with us a couple of those specific things that you just couldn't come to terms with or meet that the federal government was requiring?
Well, I think, having dual testing, I think that was a big, big burden on, our districts, even though it was, somewhat a limited pilot. But when you were asking districts to, do all the requirements that everyone had to follow, in addition to looking at, a new pilot or a new formative system, which definitely required time, it really didn't make a lot of sense. I mean, that R&D, part of it, you've got to have some flexibility so that we can navigate. So that was one of the bigger issues that we did face at the end of the day. Looking at the requirement that that we still had to have that formative assessment, or not formative, summative assessment at the end. it just seemed like a big waste of time. And at the end,
so what you're saying, Richard, is if I'm a school that is intrigued with the idea, I'd have to make a commitment to double test.
yes,
I'd have to do every currently required test,
yes,
and then on top of that, pilot
mm-hmm.
a potential new test.
yes, mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a big ask. I mean, that's a big ask of schools when the current amount of testing. One of the challenges is the amount of teaching time it takes away from the child, and so anyways, that's interesting. That it seems to me like that's an obstacle that's going to be common, is trying to get districts and then parents to accept the idea that we're going to, in our attempt to improve our assessments and end up with less of them, we're going to do more of them for a period of time.
And really, that seemed to be hypocritical. I stepped in that we had done such a good job of being able to reduce the testing, but yet here we are that we were going to now ask you to really double the amount of testing you were doing.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about multiple pathways to graduation or diplomas. Give us some specifics about that. And, I guess, when does that pathway start developing? Is it in middle school? Is it in high school? And then I probably have a couple questions as we talk about George's approach to this.
Well, definitely when you look at that, I mean, I think that, our kids, I mean, our job, I'd really appreciate our superintendent from Wisconsin. I mean, when she stated, at a recent conference we were at, that we're preparing our children for their future, not our past. And, and I think that really, if I walked away with nothing, I thought that was probably the best statement that I had, taken away.
Yeah.
Because we got to think about, these kids and where they're going. Georgia has a very robust and growing economy. But that means we're growing locally, but statewide, we're a very international company. I mean, state as when it comes to business. And so we've got to be able to diversify. And I think that allowing us to, instead of trying to put every child in the same box, let's do more tailoring to where they want to go in life. For us, for many, many years, we bought into this notion that every child was going to a 4-year university, which was a horrible, horrible mindset to do. I'd always like to use the example that, I recently had my windows replaced. Well, I didn't call my college professor to come fix my windows, but I do know what I paid that gentleman to fix. They're not windows. So, I paid for his daughter's wedding, I think. So
yeah, there you go.
But it is trying to, say, hey, how do we make education relevant? If we're going to, attract kids, keep kids, encourage, young people to get into a profession, they've got to see that relevance. And I think for us even as adults, I mean, we're not going to stick around in something that we don't enjoy. I think that, we see that and some of our teacher shortage issues that we currently have, that, the joy of teaching, the reason we got into it, has been snatched away. So, I think it is trying to have that diversity. I think everybody needs a solid foundation, which we can agree that there are certain courses that everyone has to take or needs to take. But at that point, let's begin to really think outside the box. And I think that, districts have to think that, maybe I may not be able to provide, these courses or resources on my own, but now let's work across, district and, be a little more creative.
Yeah. And technology makes that possible also, right? The connectivity that's available, a student in a rural part of any part of the country can have access to a great chemistry or history or art teacher even, where through the miracle of technology, where today many of them don't have access at all. So when you envision this, or is Georgia already providing more than one pathway to graduation? Do you envision this being like multiple diplomas that somebody can earn, and there's different ways to earn the different diplomas?
Yeah, I think yes to all the above. It is something that we are currently working on. Uh, Initially when I came into office, there was, I would say, a good deal of pushback that they felt that we were diluting and didn't want to change. But in reality, I think what we have found out is that people see, okay, this is why we need multiple pathways. And I think one of the things we want to make sure that we don't do is devalue any type of diploma. For years, I think within our technical system, it was seen, well, this is where the other kids go. Was that we're lesser than. But now, I mean, you can get a welding degree and you're making, 60, 70, plus $1,000 a year, and it's a great career. So I think for us, it is part of that messaging and making sure that we elevate all forms of education. If it's what a child, wants to pursue, we want to help them. But if it is something that we're offering within our K-12 system, then it needs to be important and it needs to have of equal value. I've been, I think I started my career, educational post-secondary career, at what we used to call a VOTEC school back in the day.
Yeah.
But that training has paid off, exponentially. So, we want to, continue to explore that and provide that. We're, talking with business and industry to see what their needs are and how they can help support that. How do we inform kids to let them know what careers are out there? I think a lot of our kids, they just don't know what they don't know. You ask them, what do you want to be when you graduate? It's usually doctor, lawyer, or ex-sports player.
That's right.
But there are a lot of jobs that are, popping up throughout Georgia, and we want to make sure that we give them the best education that allows them to be successful. But we, always know that, economies, change, and the job market changes. So, they have to be, prepared to pivot at some point in their life as well.
Yeah. How do you get it? I think the goal is for a high school student or even a middle school student for that matter, but for them to see a connection between what they're learning and what they see themselves doing after high school. And your point about we have to change this image that we have of what we used to call VOTEC, now career ed or technical careers and stuff. Many of those entry level positions in those tech or career tech type positions, that entry level requires as much, if not more, than is required to be successful your first year of college, whether it's math or programming or coding or even communication skills and stuff. But we've got to get people to say, yeah, that's all great, but that's for everybody, but not for my kids, right? That's great, but not for my kids, right? They've got to realize that these careers are valuable. I think it was about 10, 12 years ago, we coined the phrase college and career ready. Yeah. And I looking back, I wish we wouldn't have done that, because I think people thought, well, you're training them for either college or a career, and career was something that didn't require college. Really, we're preparing them for a career. And that pathway could be a 4-year degree, it could be a 2-year degree, it could be your technical certificate, but that's the ultimate goal, is career. We want kids to be career ready and for that pathway to get them there. So be interested to learn more about how, as Georgia takes on this and continues down this path. I want to make sure we spend some time talking about two more things, but one of those is about providing all students access to a 21st century classroom. And I think you make an important point where you first say we have to define it, and so that we're all using the same words and we all know what we're talking about. But talk about how a state like Georgia starts down that path, why it's important, and the value of it.
Well, definitely, I think you're looking at something that we have a vision in Georgia, and I think it's being able to communicate that vision, to have that buy-in across the state. And as you mentioned, I mean, using that common language is extremely important. When you hear business, industry, educators, the community using the same words that is encompassed in that vision, then then, it allows you to get things done. So I think having that clarity of vision and the wording is extremely important. As we think about what does that define, also realizing that looks a little different, perhaps in each district. What is business and industry? I mean, Georgia, like I said, Metro Atlanta, and the opportunities look far different than somewhere in Southwest Georgia. And so, having something that's broad enough that can be defined of, what does a 21st century education look like? But I do think that as we look at that, one of the things we all agree on is that addresses and zip codes should not define what a child has access to. I think, technology, as you mentioned, is a great innovator. It's a great tool that we have. I think, within our schools, the internet and connectivity is not a problem whatsoever. Most of our schools, if not all, are probably one-to-one when it comes to devices. So technology is something we can definitely use. I mean, my thought is, why don't you have, a class within your school, especially if you're a small school district, you can have 30 kids in a class on 30 different devices with 30 different kids somewhere else in the state, and you're getting a great education from, a well-qualified teacher. Yeah. So just trying to look at that, putting, the very best individual that is qualified to be in front of us, recruiting from business and industry, individuals that probably did not necessarily see themselves as an educator or being an educator, but, they've reached, an age in their life in which they have probably been a supervisor, they've been some type of lead, maybe a business owner, but now we can put them in front of a classroom, and that, is extremely important. Integrating what we do. I think one of the things I've challenged, my staff is that as we look to roll out our new math standards and English language arts standards and reading, those are our foundational pieces. But within our standards, we're creating opportunities so that any other course will support what the standards are for that grade level year. So if we're in eighth grade, that means whether you're art, music, computer science, maybe a career tech area, that we're involved in that process. We're giving you real life experiences about what that means. So having that ability to answer the why is extremely important. I think if we can't answer the why am I learning this, then we really need to be thinking about what we're doing. And that's extremely important. And so I think that, with all of those things, putting that focus, we're trying to make sure that to our educators, but more importantly to our students and families, that, this is why we're doing the things we're doing. We have to be able to justify that. And I think having that relevance piece really helps sell the program and sell the vision for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Kids need to see relevance. And I've said this probably too many times, but when students see relevance to what they're learning, rigor will take care of itself, right? Yes. Because when they see the relevance, they'll want more and more of it. If they don't see relevance, you're not ever going to get their best effort, right? At best, they'll learn it long enough to pass the test and then probably just dismiss the information and probably never refer back to it again until they realize that, oh, well, maybe I did need to know that, right? So let's talk about one thing, and as we wrap up, I want to talk about literacy. You mentioned when we were talking earlier about the early literacy. I think you mentioned that Georgia wasn't immune to the effects of the abrupt closure of schools and the pandemic, and but so talk to us about the importance of early literacy, and then also Georgia's efforts in that area.
Well, for me being a high school social studies teacher, one of the things that I was prepared to teach content, but my biggest issue that I faced with probably my kids was just their ability to read. Reading for me, was probably the most important skill set that our kids can leave with. Definitely, math is right there. But if you want to go somewhere in life and advance in a career, You've got to have that, ability to read, and to obtain knowledge and continuously do that. And so we see that throughout our courses. I don't care what course you take, even if it is math, there is some level of reading that goes with that. For our career tech individuals, I mean that's a technical manual, and you have to be able to read to put that application in process. So, for me, extremely, extremely important as we continue to move. Right now, we do have a council that was created by the General Assembly, so we're working through that. Very glad to say that we have some standards. I mean, I thought that our first process really needed to land on some good standards, and that has taken 8.5 years. I mean, I inherited the Common Core standards, and to be honest, I did not think they were very well thought out, and really did not have a foundational piece that we've adopted here in Georgia. So, foundationally, we had to get where we needed to be. I, firmly believe we're there. They're, extremely well done and well thought out by Georgia teachers. And so, I'm excited what that future has with that. But reading is something that we've got to be all in. I mean, and that's all parts of Georgia. To say that any Department of Education can do this by themselves, I mean, that's a tough mountain to climb. My wife was a reading teacher, and just the emphasis that if parents would just read to their child 5 minutes a day, I mean, that's not a big ask.
Right.
And I think that, the earlier that we can get our kids, learning, talking with them, being involved in their lives, reading to them, giving them, not necessarily just reading in itself, but I mean, you're expanding their vocabulary. And we know, based on research, that if a child has a very strong working vocabulary when they enter kindergarten, their likelihood of being successful, shoots up exponentially. So, hopefully it's something that we don't see that we're doing in isolation, but on the, inside, we've got to reach out to our teacher prep programs within Georgia. I think that, we need to do a better job at training teachers how to read, because once they hit our classroom, they really need to be prepared in what that looks like. And so I think, we talk about reimagining K-12 education. I would probably say we need to reimagine, higher ed and our colleges of education of what that looks like as well.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. The importance of having, those teachers coming into the classroom and being prepared for a 21st century classroom, right? And you were a teacher, and I'm sure you had the experience of your first day, and you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't align with, we hear this from teachers often, that it's not, there's nothing familiar here with what they were taught and were prepared for. So we can definitely do better there. And I couldn't agree with you more on the importance of literacy, and the earlier the better. Everything that you've talked about doing in high school, and provide more opportunities and create more relevance. Like you said, your own experience, if kids don't have that reading skill, you're never going to be able to open up and give them the ability to take advantage of all these options you've created in high school if they don't have that literacy skill. So, and really, your comments about the importance of the family and the parents' play in that message, we just can't say it enough, and help parents understand that. And then we're those that need it, provide them with tools to how to work with their child at home, and 5-10 minutes a day. It pays huge dividends, literacy being one, but it's also just great for the whole family dynamic, right? And the relationship with the child and the parents. So really, really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I just tell people, don't let that phone or, some type of device be the babysitter or the parent. Because you just, what we found out, you can never replace the teacher with a computer.
Right.
And you have to have that face-to-face interaction. And the same way with parents, grandparents, individuals that are involved with that child, you have to have that personal connection. And to be honest, I think once you make that personal connection, you can take the child, wherever they need to lead. I think that, who is your favorite teacher, growing up? Who was the person that made that difference? It wasn't because they gave great tests, but it was because they did have a great relationship with you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That's a great place to wrap it up. And we've been visiting with Superintendent of Public Instruction Richard Woods from the great state of Georgia. And Richard, we always end by asking our guest, share with us one piece of trivia or information about Georgia that would be that most people wouldn't know.
Well, I think one of the things, if you visited Georgia, sometimes talking about literacy, how we pronounce some of our cities and counties and districts can be a little bit unique. We have Houston, Texas, but we have Houston County, Georgia. We have, Cairo, Egypt, but we have Cairo, Georgia. And I think a lot of people say, Omega. Well, we have an Omega. And like I said, spelled the same. But probably my favorite is Taliaferro County. Now, if you were to look at the spelling of Taliaferro County, and I have never figured out how in the world do you get that pronunciation looking at that term. So when you come to Georgia, we actually know whether you're from here or not, because if you can't say these locations correctly, you stand out really quick.
I see. Yeah. Okay. That's the telltale sign if someone's new to the areas, is if they can pronounce the names of the cities the way they're using the phonetics of Georgia, and not what they're used to. Well, that's a great one. That's a fun one. I appreciate you sharing that with us, and appreciate you being on Swimming Upstream, and appreciate all the great work you're doing for the kids of Georgia. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. And remember, our children may only be 22% of our population, but they represent 100% of our future. If you found this conversation valuable, subscribe to our YouTube channel and find us on your favorite podcast platform. Swimming Upstream is part of the Strategos Podcast Network. To view the entire lineup of our shows, visit our website, strategosgroup.com.